Welcome in to another edition of the All Things Bama podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin. Here joining me is Joey Blackwell and Tony Tsoukalas, both staff writers of BamaCentral.com, the Sports Illustrated home for all Alabama Crimson Tide news. Guys, glad you're back on here. I know it's been a really, really busy week, baseball, and then obviously football, right? Alabama's Pro Day was earlier this week, and you both were there, and I'm looking forward to hearing kind of what some of y'all's takeaways were.
Yeah, I'll start. Or sorry, I'll start. For Pro Day, I think the first thing that stands out for me is that like Slade Bolden looks a lot more in shape than you. I don't know if he bulked up or whatever. He looked a lot more athletic, and I know people joke around with the Patriots getting him, but he looked like somebody that maybe a lot of people would like. I saw he made like a really good catch on a ball from Bryce Young, and he was in really good shape. I don't know what his numbers were, but I was impressed by him. Obviously, the biggest takeaway from all of this is Evan Neal going through positional drills, and he looked really good. I don't know if that really matters in terms of his draft stock. I don't know if he can do anything to affect his draft stock because he's, either going to go number 1 overall or he's, going to go probably I think the farthest I could see him really dropping would be like 5 or 7. So he's going to be taken care of. But yeah, I think overall, I think it was a great day for everyone that went. Some of the big notable guys like the receivers, they didn't get to go. But we did get to see Evan Neal. We got to see some Christian Harris do some stuff, Brian Robinson do some stuff. So I thought it was a good performance from the people that went. And, maybe we see some Alabama players improve their draft stocks from it.
Yeah, and Tony took the words right out of my mouth. The biggest thing that came that I noticed yesterday was Slade Bolden. I thought that he performed very well yesterday. And to echo pretty much everything Tony said, it looked like he has put on muscle mass since the national championship game. His muscles were much more defined. Ran the 40-yard dash without a shirt on, just kind of showing that off. Really, really quick guy. He looked good in the, despite he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he looked really good in the broad jump. From what we could see behind all the NFL scouts there. So overall, just a very solid day for him. Phil Mathis also did well in the position drills. Didn't see as much of him. Evan Neal, obviously, one of the big news from him is that he didn't run the 40. But, he's an offensive lineman. He doesn't have to do that. He made the point that doesn't really play into his position, and he's absolutely right. Evan Neal, his draft stock really can't he can't really go any higher or fall any lower than where he is right now. So I just overall thought it was a really good day for Alabama.
Hey, we didn't even mention Daniel Wright's silver hair. Yeah, I think he also had a silver hair and he had like the silver beard.
He looked like Quicksilver running down.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I wonder if that made him any faster. But yeah, that was Daniel Wright's always had the interesting hair. He had a red hair at one point. Now it's completely silver. And I think if I saw it correctly, so is his little he's got like a little beard that's also completely silver now as well.
What I got from afar, just looking at highlights on SEC Network, ESPN, whatever. Tony might be having to eat some words, Joey. There was a couple weeks ago. It was me, Tony, and Katie talking about a lot of these guys and their draft prospects. And I said, Slade Bolden's a day 3 guy. And Tony goes, "Oh, he's not getting drafted." Well, it looks like he is. It looks like the Louisiana kid's turning some heads, man.
It definitely looks like he's going to get drafted now. You know what? And I was probably wrong to say that. I mean, look, he's had some production over the last few years, and he's a guy that can do a lot of things. I think he's going to also be a special teams guy. No matter who picks him. He's somebody that's probably going to start off on special teams, and he's athletic enough to do a lot of things. He can be the guy that, we've seen him catch punts at Alabama. We've seen him return kicks at Alabama, but I think he'd probably be athletic enough to go on kick coverage and or kick, kickoff, return, so like, but not as a returner, he's a guy that can move up and down the field. And like Joey said, he's got a pretty good defined muscle mass now. So he's a really versatile athlete that you can kind of put at a lot of spots in special teams.
No doubt about it. And you, speaking of receivers, Tony, the number one guy that Alabama fans have just had their eye on since he announced his transfer, Jermaine Burton from Georgia. On Thursday, you wrote an incredible piece, a kind of backstory from him, from his talking to his sister as well. So I kind of want to hear just about that and kind of plug that right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they look at Jermaine Burton, they don't know his full transfer kind of like spectrum of he's really bounced around a lot. He started off in Hapeville Charter in Atlanta, then he went to IMG, got homesick, came back, thought he was going to spend his last 2 years in Marietta due to a transfer rule in the Georgia High School Athletic Association. He was forced to kind of pick another state, and so he moved all the way out to Calabasas, California, spent his last 2 years there, where he's working with Curtis Conway as a receiver coach. But he's a guy that I think he likes that transition, or he likes to be a little bit uncomfortable. He likes to push himself. He likes to he's always searching for the better option, or the way that he's going to be able to provide for his family, and the way he's going to be a better receiver to kind of push forward his dream. And when you look at it, Alabama was that better option for him. He was not used well at Georgia. And I know Georgia wants to downplay some of, you ask Georgia fans, maybe they talk a little bit about how, he wasn't that big of a part of their offense, but he should have been. He was their leading receiver in terms of yards, but he only had 30 targets. That's as many times as Georgia targeted its running back James Cook. I mean, they had the same amount of targets. That's a ridiculous number. I mean, when you look at it, John Mechie in one fewer game had 128 targets. So more than four times as many targets as Jermaine Burton. If you kind of you can kind of do the math there. You put a Jermaine Burton into Alabama's offense, give him 4 times as many opportunities. I mean, shoot, even if he catches half of those balls, he's going to be putting up some serious numbers. And I expect him to be, a 1,000-yard receiver with Bryce Young. And I think he's going to be Alabama's #1 receiving target. And I think he's going to be the #1 receiver. And he's a really special playmaker. He averaged 19.12 yards per reception. He's a big play threat. He's not Jamison Williams in terms of that kind of straight line speed, but in terms of being a big play receiver, I think he's definitely fills that role for Alabama.
You both were in Tuscaloosa on Thursday, hearing from Javion Cohen, Jordan Battle. Joey, let's start with you. What was kind of your takeaways from those two guys? Because, Jordan Battle coming back for a senior year, right? I mean, he's projected to be take another step in his leadership development. And Javion Cohen, a guy me and Tony have talked about on here, is kind of going to be a mainstay on this offensive line this season.
Yeah, Jordan Battle, he talked about how, he's, a recurring theme for Alabama players coming back this year is the theme of unfinished business. And that's no different for Jordan Battle. He talked about that today, how he was hoping to compete for another natty this year. He's looking forward to getting his degree in December. So, just kind of the same old speak that you would expect to hear from him, but he did give that as the reasons he's coming back. Javion Cohen, on the other hand, Tony was being very observant and noticed that Cohen had deleted pretty much everything off of all of his social media pages. So Tony had the courage to ask him what was going on there. And Cohen talked about how, he basically just wanted to kind of step away from social media to kind of regain his focus on, the task at hand. And overall, with those two answers from Battle and Cohen and what we've seen so far from the players we've talked to this spring, it seems like overall there's like a renewed sense of focus on not just football this year, but on success and getting back to that natty. Because that game against Georgia, leading for the first half definitely left a bitter taste in their mouths and falling apart in the fourth quarter. And it seems like this team is just really, really focused on improving over the end of last season's result.
Tyler, I'm a little sad about to bring back about the Javion Cohen social media. That guy was a great follow on social media. He had the crane kick with Auburn. But it's not just that. He'd like chime in on other players and he'd have like funny things to say. I was like bummed when I found that. I started looking for the crane kick, just to maybe ask him a little bit about that. And then I just realized it's all gone. And I don't even know how to did he have to I'm not a social media wizard, but does he have to scrub? Is there a way to just delete everything at once, or did that guy have to go through every single?
I'm sure. knowing NIL, I'm sure and the brand builders they have at Alabama, I'm sure all he had to do was put in a word and somebody took care.
It seems like such a task, especially for somebody like Cohen that was like tweeting a lot. I mean, like, it's a lot of tweeting.
Well, I remember even in his recruitment, he had done a lot of stories with us, and I remember interviewing him multiple times because it was such a big deal from him flipping over from Auburn to Alabama, and I mean he was dogging Auburn, right? I mean, in the interviews, you can go look at the stories. I mean, talking really bad about them, and even on Twitter, right? He was getting into it sometimes with fans, and then even if I remember this, I remember when Alabama was pursuing Damani Jackson. There was a quote from Damani that was like, it really opened my eyes. And then he quote tweeted it and was like, "This is what I said before I flipped from Alabama, or before I flipped from Auburn to Alabama." And so, yeah, I miss those quirks too. I knew there was somebody missing from Twitter. Didn't know it was going to be Javion Cohen though. What a loss for that website.
He's still bringing that energy though to the offensive line. He's a fun character. You watch him. You can see all the he's still gonna do his fair share of trolling, I bet too. I was looking back at pictures of him, and he was doing the Gator chomp in Florida. He was shushing the Auburn crowd after the overtime, and it's not just the trolling. I think he brings a really positive vibe to that offensive line, which is going to be key. Heading in for the rest of this offseason as Alabama kind of tries to shape up its offensive line and fill those holes. And he's a guy that not only brings that positive energy, he's also can play tackle or guard, and they're going to need that versatility as well. So Javion Cohen's going to be a really important part of this team. Both as a off-field presence and an on-field presence.
Wasn't that also Javion Cohen that did the crane kick like in front of Auburn at the Birmingham Bowl practice?
That's the whole reason why, I brought it up. Yeah,
I couldn't remember. I thought he did it on the field too, but I couldn't remember if that was also him that did it.
No, he would did it in like a parking lot overlooking the. Yeah,
they were practicing in the Hoover
High School.
They were practicing. Yeah, they were practicing at Hoover High School, and he just drove up there in the overlook and captured an amazing video. Which
is gone now. It's gone.
Somebody's got to have a screen recording. Hey, check Instagram though. If you go look at his tag, it might be on Instagram as well. Like
his Instagram is also gone, Tyler. It's a tough day.
Wow. Oh man, I just found a story from somebody about that practice crane kick. And if you scroll down to the tweet, it says this tweet has been deleted. So
yeah, the tweet's been deleted.
I'm sure somebody saved it somewhere, but still,
somebody's got to do some digging and
But you do bring up a good point though, in that he's very vital to the offensive line success this year, right? You look at who you lost, right? You're about to lose Evan Neal, which you guys were there in person, saw him at the pro day. I don't know how he isn't a top 3 pick, right? I mean, I think in the top 5, the only team who doesn't really need a left tackle right now is the Lions. They've got Sewell, but I mean, I would be astonished if he fell out of the top 3 with Evan Neal. But right, he's going to be a guy that Alabama's going to have to rely on. And I know, Tony, you've kind of been on the inside track with Tyler Steen and his whole recruitment. I don't know if you have anything else you can add from last week's podcast, but Javion Cohen's going to be a guy who's, going into, his 3rd year in the program, a guy who really is expected to make leaps and bounds from where he was.
To touch on Tyler Steen, I think Alabama's in great shape, and I don't even know, but by the time you're listening to this podcast, I mean, he's supposed to make his decision by the end of the week, so this podcast will come out on Friday. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we hear a decision from him sometime while you're listening to this podcast or soon after, so and I think Alabama's in good shape for him, and so that would probably allow Javion Cohen to stick at guard, which I think is probably preferable because he did a good job at guard, and you want as much familiarity as possible. So if you grab a Tyler Steen, he probably plays left tackle, and then you've got Cohen at left guard, and then you can have a center right guard, and maybe somebody like JC Latham at right tackle. So it kind of helps shape things out. But yeah, I mean, Javion Cohen is going to be a huge part, like you said, Tyler. And I think whether or not they get Tyler Steen, he's going to be a really big part.
Outside of what we saw Nick Saban wearing the knockoff Christopher Mobley sweatshirt that a lot of gump Twitters took and kind of ran with. What are some of the main takeaways you've heard from Coach Saban about this team and how things are really starting to shape up because obviously the first scrimmage is Saturday, and that will be a really good tell of where they're at right now and their progress in the spring. And I know it's just spring. What have you guys heard from him that's really maybe encouraging?
One takeaway I've heard is that he's spoken nothing but high praise about the transfers. We talked about Jermaine Burton earlier, but also Eli Ricks and particularly Jahmyr Gibbs. He seems to be very impressed with these guys, and they've been able to kind of be implemented into the team fairly quickly. So that's the first thing that jumps off the page to me. Obviously, it kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying earlier about the players, talking about how there's just a renewed sense of focus on this team this year. And I mean, Saban's always focused, that's kind of a duh point, but at the same time, I think that he's really rubbed off on this team in this offseason compared to how, last year they were struggling with leadership. They had a lot of, internal issues, it seemed, from the outside looking in. And just this early in the season, kind of looking at how Saban's talking about this team and how the players themselves are carrying themselves, it looks like, fingers crossed that those won't be as big of issues this year.
Yeah, he even said that he enjoyed coaching. This team was a fun team to coach, and I think that's not something you would have said about last year's team. As talented as it was, that team had a lot of headaches. And who's to say that this team isn't going to cause its own set of headaches for Nick Saban? But I think at the moment he's really liking what he sees, and he's got a pretty complete group. I think some of the holes that Alabama has aren't as glaring. I mean, break down the holes in this team. Obviously, the offensive line, we touched on that. Receiver, I think you were able to fix a lot of that by bringing in Jermaine Burton, and then other holes, like maybe you look at the defensive line, there's not like that inside pass rusher. But then again, you've got 3 seniors returning, as starters. So you really can't be that upset about that. That will probably figure itself out as well. So I think there's just not a lot of glaring holes. There should be a lot of leadership to kind of help him out as well. So I think it could be as much as something can be a fun season for Nick Saban, I think this could be, or maybe a less stressful season, probably a better way to put it for Nick Saban.
No doubt. And I kind of want to transition here to the hardwood. Last time since we talked, Tony, another Alabama basketball player has entered the transfer portal, and it's Jason Holt. Expected move right here. This is a guy who kind of was making a presence for himself on TikTok. I know a lot of Gump Twitter was talking about that as well. But this was an expected move, and it does free up a scholarship for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, this finally opens up a scholarship, right? And now they're at -1 now, because you have, depending on who else leaves in terms of going pro. But yeah, look, there's probably going to be more. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be surprised that if you circle a Darius Miles next. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? He's a guy that can go either way. Even a Jawan Gary could go either way, depending on how what Alabama, how those conversations go, and how they end up both feeling. But this is something that we expected. We expected the big turnover on the roster, and I think you're going to start seeing, now that there is room for more people, I think you're going to start seeing more people come in. You know what I'm saying? I think Alabama's working out, or bringing in, not working out, but bringing in a few transfer targets, and I think you're going to see some of those guys maybe start to pounce on the opportunity to play for the Tide. And Nate Oates has shown that he can attract high-profile transfers. I mean, look, he brought in Javon Quinterly, he brought in Amari Burnett, 2 McDonald's All-Americans. So there's a lot of people that want to play for this guy, and I'm sure he's going to, hit the transfer portal pretty hard. That mixed with the recruiting class they're bringing in, this could be a really talented roster next season.
Yeah, looking at, the loss of Jason Holt, Alabama, anybody that follows Alabama basketball will know that, there have been issues with Jason Holt on the team, but he's had a couple of scuffles with Nate Oates. Nate Oates even talked about a couple of them. Just, there's always been that problem. But at the same time, Jason Holt was able to develop as not as a leader, but as a player over his time, at Alabama. And no doubt, sometimes it's just best for players to go find somewhere that fits their play style better and where they fit better. And, just to better your potential of going to the NBA. And I think that's exactly what Jason's doing, and more power to him for doing it. Alabama is also bringing in, a ton of talent this year. from their 2022 class. So things are looking up for them. And like Tony was saying, there's still plenty of time. Alabama will probably have at least two or three scholarship spots, heading into this season. And Nate Oates has proven over the past several years that he's one of the best coaches in the country at attacking the transfer portal. You have a lot of LSU players that are leaving. There's players from Missouri, South Carolina, a lot of talent on the board, and that's just the SEC. So looking forward to seeing, what Nate Oates is able to bring in. No doubt that Jed is getting a ton of mileage this offseason.
Yeah, and you look at a guy like Deshaun Holt. I mean, was he really going to play next season with all the talent that they're bringing in? I mean, I'm being real.
No, not with the talent they have coming in. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, they're bringing in Brandon Miller at his position. You know what I'm saying? That's
yeah. I mean, yeah, he just played in the McDonald's All-American game earlier this week, right? Jaden Bradley did as well. So, the writing was on the wall for Deshaun Holt, but two guys that Alabama, I'm curious to get y'all's opinion on this. So Mark Sears, right, from Ohio, an Alabama kid from the Muscle Shoals area, he announced his transferring from Ohio. And then you've got the Princeton transfer who met with Nate Oates earlier last weekend in Tuscaloosa, Jalen Elwyn. I can't really pronounce his name.
Llewellyn, I think it is.
Llewellyn. I struggle with words. So who is Alabama? I mean, I guess with depending on what happens with Shackelford, and maybe some other guys who you mentioned, Tony. My question was going to be, who's Alabama most likely to get out of those two?
I mean, I think when you look at it, Sears is like a Muscle Shoals kid, and both of them have pretty good stats. I would go with Sears as the one that I've heard that I've heard that there's rumors that he's pretty interested and that Alabama's interested in him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that one got pulled off. He'd be that veteran point guard that you need, because I'm assuming that obviously Javon Quinterly is going to leave, but not only him, JD Davis and Jaden Shackelford, I expect to leave as well. So you need some kind of veteran. I don't think that Jaden Bradley's ready to play like on a consistent basis or ready to be the starting point guard. So I think that they're going to need the veteran guy to come in. It's a matter of, I don't know if they need two veteran guys though. We'll see. Cause Namari Burnett can also play the point guard position if they wanted to. And it might be a tough sell for, if you had two veteran point guards that one of them is probably not going to be happy, right? If you're transferring in as a veteran point guard, you're going to want to have more of a established role. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two guys comes in. I think it'd be Sears. And then maybe you take somebody that could have a role, but that's not going to be necessarily a starter. Maybe you get a Beetle Bouldin type, some a gritty guy that knows he's not necessarily a starter, maybe could start, but knows he's not a starter, but is willing to just be the team guy and be the hustle guy. Because look, this team needed that and they didn't have that. So if you had a Beetle Bouldin type, that'd be great for this next team.
Goodness, Beetle Bouldin. I hadn't heard his name, and he feels like a distant memory so long ago, you know what I mean? And if you think about it, right, he was one of these. His impact really wasn't shown in the stat sheet, but man, he brought toughness. He brought the blue collarness. And Mark Sears, I'm looking at this guy. I'm looking at his numbers right now, guys. All right, so he shot 44.4% from the field, almost 41% from three. Almost 20 points a game. Good for top 30 in the country. Alabama last year, they weren't efficient from the field really in any metric. To me, Mark Sears seems like the must-have. Now Jalen, the kid from Princeton, he does a lot of nice things as well. But at 3, I'm putting down Mark Sears as kind of in that must-get category. What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he'd be highly beneficial to this Alabama basketball team. I don't want to kind of repeat what you just said, but you pretty much said what I would say about him. I think he's a very talented guy and just somebody so that he has a lot of qualifications that were missing from Alabama basketball this past season, and even more so with the departure of some potential guys that maybe people didn't see leaving. We still have a couple. There's still plenty of time left for players to test the NBA draft fighters, but absolutely, I think he'd be a big get for Alabama.
Lastly, I want to kind of switch now to the diamond, Joey. You've been a guy who's covered Brad Bohannon very extensively. You were known as the baseball guy, right, in terms of writers in Tuscaloosa, and we really do appreciate your coverage of that program. But over the last couple of weeks, it's been kind of rough, right? There's been ups, there's been downs, right? You only won 1 out of 3 against Mississippi State when you should have swept them. The midweek loss against UAB, they were able to beat South Alabama in the midweek. Just kind of what's your take on Brad Bohannon up to this point in the season, and what's Alabama's ceiling now? I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, but what do you see? What's the outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, the fact that you said in the intro there that Alabama should have swept Mississippi State, I think that shows how much this team has grown. And obviously Mississippi State has had a talent fall off compared to last year, as the defending national champions. But this is an Alabama team that if you take away the 13-6 loss against Florida, they've been in every single SEC game they've played. The 2 wins for Mississippi State were both walk-off wins. Obviously, the loss at UAB was a rough one. That was really bad. But they're expected to lose to a number 9 Florida team. They're expected to lose to Mississippi State, but they held in, with most, or held up with most of those games. So I think one of the biggest problems with them right now is their bullpen. And, Coach Bo talked, on after the South Alabama game, I asked him how Brock Guffey was doing. And instead of answering that question, he just went into a full minute and a half of injury updates. And that shows where this team is. They have had a lot of injury problems. Hunter Ruth still hasn't pitched in a while. Landon Green pitched on Tuesday, but it was the first time he had pitched since March 6th. Brock Guffey, of course, hurt his shoulder. We haven't seen him back. Hopefully he'll be back maybe this weekend. But with that shallow bullpen depth, they are having a lot of problems. But that being said, their offense has gotten them much, much better over the past couple of weeks. They've just been falling short, and their starting pitching has been a really solid rotation for them. Every time they put a starter out there, you can usually get 4 or 5 innings giving up 2 runs or less. So I know that might not sound like a lights out, starting pitching, but for Alabama, that's huge progress, especially when you consider that Connor Prelip, their ace, is still out for this season. So there's just been all of those issues. And as far as a ceiling, I do think that this team still has it in them to make it to a regional. They're not going to host a regional this year. I think that's out of the question. But I do think that just basing this season off of last year, I think they could still go to a regional. It will all come down to they need to start winning these close games. If they keep dropping these close games, they're obviously not going to go anywhere. But if they can pick up 2 out of 3 every weekend instead of, of those games where they lose by 1 in walk-off fashion, I really think this team has a shot. But it is going to take a bit of growth, over the next couple of weeks, and they need to do it really fast.
I think what's frustrating for a lot of Alabama fans is when you look at Alabama's baseball program, right, rich history, then you look at a program like Tennessee, right, and you see where Tennessee's at, and Tony Vitello. Tony Vitello and Brad Bohannon, they got hired at the same time at their respective schools. They're now in both their 5th seasons there. What has Tony Vitello done at Tennessee? And I might be comparing apples to oranges here. I don't know, but you go look at a number 1 ranking. You go look at a College World Series appearance, right? They've gone to the Super Region. I mean, they've won regionals. And then, you kind of look at what Alabama's trajectory has been. Like, it's just, to me, I understand the frustration from where a lot of Alabama fans sit. And I'm just curious, what might be the urgency, in getting this thing turned around, because, you can only use injuries so much as an excuse for so long.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But at the same time, I mean, Bo made a very good point at the beginning of this season. And he said that this is the first time, or he feels like this is the first team that's been truly his, that he's gotten a coach. And he's right. This is only Bohannon's, his 4th year at Alabama. So this is the first year where literally everybody that's on the team has been one of his recruits. So now that he has that, I mean, they have a lot of talent. You can't keep leaning on injuries. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, when you have played, one of your best returners and Will Hamiter go down day 1, and your ace that was last year projected to be the number 1 pick in the MLB draft before the season started, you have those injuries. I mean, you can definitely credit those, but it all comes down to winning those close games, and they need to stop dropping these midweek games, because when the committee is looking at a tournament resume and they understand that SEC is a tough conference to win in. But when you look at these losses to, Southern Miss it was actually a good loss. Southern Miss is a very talented team. But yeah, North Alabama, UAB, all of these midweek losses, that's really going to come back to haunt them if they can't get the midweek games figured out.
And who knows, maybe when Alabama was on that path to greatness in 2020 before COVID shut everything down, maybe that changed things, right? Maybe if that didn't happen, but you could say that, for a lot of different schools, and I know a lot of fans are frustrated, but they've still got plenty of time, right? I mean, the SEC tournament hoovers not till the end of May. We've still got 2 full months to really turn this thing around for Alabama, but we'll see. And we appreciate your coverage, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Tony, we appreciate everything you do also for Bama Central. Guys, thank you so much for coming on here to the All Things Bama podcast. For Joey Blackwell and Tony Tsoukalas, I'm Tyler Martin. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching.